Hello, yogis. So, are you in practice for the psoas? So, this is a special sequence I have designed because the psoas is a pretty problematic muscle in most people's bodies. It's one of three hip flexors. Its correct name is actually the iliopsoas, and you have a left and a right. Um, why it's so problematic in a lot of people is from sitting, shortening and contracting of your hip flexors is going to cause an imbalance through your pelvis. And the psoas is a very long muscle. It starts at the very bottom of your rib cage, so T12, so on either side of your spine, and it goes all the way down either side of the spine. It has fascial connections to all five lumbar vertebrae. Then it disappears underneath the SI joints and goes deep underneath your organs and ends up popping out in the bottom of the pelvis and attaching to lesser trochanter on the femur. So this muscle transverses lower and upper body. It's what allows you to forward fold. It's what allows you when you're standing to bring your knee up towards your chest. You can't take a single step without your psoas. Also, turns out you can't take a single breath without your psoas because it is connected to your diaphragm fascially. So, incredibly important muscle in the body. And I'll give you some more information on that when we're actually marinating in different postures. So, for today's practice, you'll need your typical props. We're going to be on our back quite a bit, but you will need some blocks and you will need a bolster or a big pillow or a substitute. You could have a big rolled up blanket. All right, let's get started. So we're going to come onto our backs in what we call pentacle pose. So that's just you looking like a five-pointed star. Option to close your eyes or soften the gaze. Let's just release those shoulder blades to the earth. Feet flopping open to the sides, backs of the hands grounded. So as usual, we're going to start to connect with the body, taking a scan through the body, looking for areas where we're holding on to physical tension, remembering to check in with some of those more typical holding spots, jaws relaxed, tongue relaxed, tops of the shoulders away from the ears, little space between the eyebrows, not furrowing here, softer belly. Wiggle those hips side to side and just release into your lower back. So we're giving our bodies permission to release and let go. Now let's take another scan through this time, just checking in if there's areas of the body that we need to be more careful with in our practice. And just remembering that the body talks to us in the form of physical sensations. So any sharp stabbing, shooting, burning, or electrical sensations, it's the body saying no. And of course, we have that built-in guide to keep us safe, the breath. If you can't breathe into something, if you're just sipping air and not exhaling, you are triggering your fight or flight nervous system and your body is saying no. So let's bring our awareness into the breath. So we'll start with just that simple practice, watching breath flow in and out of the nose to start. And just by turning our awareness in, we immediately start to breathe better. So the breath will start to smooth out, will start to slow down. There's nothing special that you have to do to make that happen. And it could be that you fairly quickly start to notice the rise and fall of the belly as our diaphragm comes into play. So as I mentioned, you just keep your awareness on your belly, watching it rise on the inhale and move back towards the spine on the exhale. Your psoas does have fascial connections to your diaphragm. So what do you think it would mean if your psoas, left and right, are overly contracted, overly tight? Do you think that's going to be an optimal breathing situation? You guessed right, it would not be. So The psoas is often called the muscle of the soul because it's very integral to our body and it's very deep in our body. And there's places where you cannot even get close to it, you cannot even touch it. Often therapists can, massage therapists, other body workers can get in and physically manipulate things. But the psoas, there's very few places where it comes close enough to the surface that we can touch it. Most people agree the psoas doesn't even like to be touched. So it's also where it resides in the body and transversing both upper and lower body. It's going right through that pelvis. So if it's overly contracted, it's going to pull your pelvis out of alignment. That's going to have big implications for your lower back. So you're going to get back pain. So physically, mechanically, functionally, it's really important. For the breath, it's important. But then if we think more of our energetic bodies, the subtle body, it's also housing the three first main chakras of the body, which are root and sacral and the solar plexus, which are considered three very important chakras for keeping you grounded and feeling secure and having a good foundation and being flexible enough to work with change and having a good idea of your own personal willpower. Those are all pretty important things. So you can speak about the psoas from an energetic level or a physical level or a mental emotional level. So it's often considered, like I said, the muscle that holds trauma. And trauma is different things to different people. It doesn't have to be something life-threatening. It could be something that happens that's small and subtle, but it happens repeatedly and often enough that it becomes something that is a problem mentally or emotionally. So last few breaths here, observing. So the best thing we can do for our psoas is bring length into it. We sit in chairs, it's contracted. We take walks, we take runs, it contracts more and more and more. It needs a lot of extension. That is the absolutely best thing you could do. So we're going to do a lot of that in this practice. So bend back through your knees. And the very first thing we're going to do is a pose called half pontoon. You have an option. We're going to elevate our sacrum so that we get more extension available to the psoas. So if you have a nice big bolster and it's pretty solid, you could use that. If you don't have a bolster, use a block. Also might be that your bolster is too big for you. So the only way to figure that out is by bringing it in under your sacrum and seeing how it is. So coming up through the hips and sliding the bolster right in under the sacrum. Remember, sacrum, triangular bone, very bottom of your spine. Not too low down with the prop into the glutes, not too high up into the lower back. So we're going to take our lower back into extension also at the same time, which is good for it. So if the bolster doesn't work, use a block. And even if the block doesn't work, it could be you have some back issues and you need to be more careful. You can do these postures with nothing under your sacrum. So we're going to call this position neutral. Just walk your heels back more to your prop or to your glutes. Here we're kind of turning off the hip flexors. They're not really contracted and they're not really in extension either. And we're just going to take a few breaths. And then we're going to draw the right knee in. So holding the right knee with either clasped hands or a strap, whichever works for you. Biceps will do all the work here, holding the knee in. You're going to just be really passive through those hip flexors, so soft into that hip crease. The target is our left hip flexor group, left psoas, so we're going to walk the left foot away. You might be able to fully extend it and just anchor onto your heel. If you get any sort of shooting or stabbing, pinching sensations in your lower back, that's a no, and you'll need to walk the left heel back until that stops. So make sure you're listening to the feedback zone of the lower back. Make sure you're not shrugging those shoulders up to your ears and relaxing your jaw and your tongue. A little tuck of the chin. So half pontoon. Extension through left hip flexors, left psoas. Come back to your breath. Just remember all of our typical principles of yin, passive and soft, minimal muscular involvement, able to breathe, but feeling a sensation in the body that we're doing some work might cause some achy sensations. Finding our stillness and letting time be our magic ingredient here. So if you're a person that sits a lot in a chair, let's say that's your job, sitting at a desk, I'd spend a lot more time doing this pose at night, trying to lengthen out all that contraction, all that flexion that happened during the day. So we'll do 30 more seconds on this side. So we're going to nice and slow walk that left foot back to where we started and release the right foot down beside, back to our neutral. So depending on what you're using for a prop, if you're using one at all, it might scoot around. So just adjust back, make sure your sacrum is fully supported. And heels back towards the glutes. And we just pause here in between the sides. And then bringing left knee in, hands interlace in front of left kneecap or use a strap. Biceps do the job, left hip crease is soft. And then start to walk the right leg away. So you might be different on this side. You may be able to fully extend and anchor into your heel, or maybe you have to keep a bend through the knee. Just take a little scan through and make sure you didn't bring any tension back in. Anchor the mind onto the breath, and we marinate here. So still extension, just switch sides. And just staying with the breath. So essentially every time you breathe, you are toning the psoas due to their fascial connections. So let's slowly walk the right leg back now. Left leg down the side. Back to our neutral. So the natural progression from here is to move into full pontoon. So yes, you guessed it, both legs walking away, heels walking away. Now you may be able to bring both heels anchored and get a lot of extension here, or you might have to keep bends through the knees. Feedback zone is still the lower back, nothing's changed. You may also be able to bring your arms up and behind the crown of the head. Just make sure you don't get any pins and needles. And if that doesn't work for you, just keep your hands down alongside your hips. So if you are in this full pontoon, including the arms, you're really getting into that big superficial back line in the body. In addition to getting all that nice extension through our hip flexors. So you might get some achy sensations building in any part of that back line. For me, I was getting in my calves. That's the tightest part of me. There are any more seconds here. Unless, of course, you need to come out early. Always remember to come out early if you need to. So if you took the arms up past the crown of the head, just bring them back down beside your hips. And nice and slow, walk those heels back. So it could be kind of achy coming on out. Back to our neutral. Pause here for a few breaths. So just noticing any sensations that arise after releasing the posture. Now we've had our lower back in extension for quite a while, so we do need to be careful here. So you could roll up onto your balls of your feet, lift your hips up, and then slide out your prop and slowly return. Sacrum to the earth, and then let's extend our legs, take them long. And we just want to come into a stillness here. So in yin, we often do what's called rebound postures in between. This is a rebound. We're not moving, but still a rebound. Our body, the fascia, all the trains will be moving back, creeping back. That's called hysteresis. And sometimes you can feel things happening when you come into this stillness. Other times we like to do sort of rhythmic bouncing or movement to help distribute hydration that we've built up. So it doesn't matter which one you do. There's no set rules in yin. All right, let's bend back through the knees. And just roll onto one side. Just pausing here for a moment. So just helping yourself to stabilize, especially if you have blood pressure issues or maybe a vertigo. I'm personally suffering from the positional type of vertigo, meaning it crystals dislodged from your inner ear. It's very annoying. It just means you can't jump up like you normally do because you get pretty dizzy. All right, so we're going to go into the psoas now from a different angle, and we're going to go onto our front body, and we're going to do Sphinx pose. So you may need your bolster, so make sure it's accessible. And coming onto your front body, we're going to start in Superman. So arms extend past the crown of the head, forehead grounded. Just wiggle those hips side to side and release into that lower back. Palms grounded, or turn your thumbs up to the sky if that's easier in the shoulders. So Superman. Now, when we move into Sphinx, what we're trying to do is bring compression into the spine, into the back. So more back bending. Some people already feel a lot of compression happening just lying here on their front body. If that's you, you might have to stay here just a little while, or you may have to stay here the whole time. Just remember that rule. If you're feeling it, you're doing it. So if you can feel compression, then something's happening. If you're like me and you don't feel anything doing this, next level would be to bring the bolster in under the armpits. Lifts upper body away from the earth. More back bending, more compression. Maybe you're like me, that does nothing for you. Coming to fuller expression of Sphinx. Forearms grounded, shoulder distance apart. Elbows just in front of shoulder. They could be below, but never behind. And then get heavy into that space below your belly button. Make sure your glutes are turned off. And then we just want to have a nice long spine, heart shining forward, shoulder blades on our backs, and no dumping shoulders and ears, no crunching into that neck. Keep that neck nice and long. So you still might not feel a lot of back bending here if you're really bendy. And you're usually really bendy because you have really short spinous processes in your spine. That means you can go a long way before you come to bone on bone. So people with really long spinous processes, not going to be as bendy. So feet could come up. So we are going to do Sphinx twice. So I will show you in Sphinx Part 2 a couple more further variations of Sphinx. I think for Sphinx Part 1, this is as far as you should go first time around. So bringing a back bend into the body. Of course, there are much more difficult back bends you can do in yoga. Full wheel pose, Dhanurasana. Maybe you've seen people do that or you've done it yourself. It can be very problematic pose. So depending on who's doing it, you could actually really hurt yourself. I don't teach Dhanurasana in yoga classes because most people don't have what they need to take themselves into that position, which is really strong core and really strong quads, and then a flexible back. So most people end up hurting themselves. This is a back bend. Same benefits. In fact, better benefits because we're getting into your fascia as well as muscle. And it's much more accessible, less chance of injury. So a lot of the times in the West, people get really hung up on making cool poses, the people that put all that stuff on Instagram. Most people can't do those poses, and it's not accessible, and it could be really detrimental. So this is when we say, don't let the ego rule the body. Let the body rule the body. Let the body be the guide, not your ego. All right, 30 more seconds here in Sphinx Part 1. You might feel some achiness building up as we're loading up that fascia. Okay. If you took your feet up to the sky, nice and slow, bring them back. If you have a bolster under your armpits, pull it out. And we're all going to return back to our Superman. Forehead grounded, hands past the crown of the head. Take a nice cleansing breath here. Inhale, nose. Exhale out. And then we're going to take a little counter pose, and we're going to bend through our elbows so that they're like cactus arms, 90 degrees. And we're going to turn our left ear down to your mat, or maybe slide a block in under the left side of the head. And then we're going to slide that right knee up the floor towards right elbow. So this is a nice counter pose. We release half of that lumbar, and we're releasing right psoas. So remember, when you release a muscle, when you put it into a position where it can release tension, that's a good thing, right? Healthy muscles, healthy tissues in the body need three things: strengthening, lengthening, and releasing. So yoga does a really good job at getting those three things into different parts of the body. Some sports, as we know, or exercises we know, is more about strengthening. Not all of them tend to have a good focus on all three. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do any of those other things. Of course you should. But what I am saying is on your active recovery days, yoga is kind of got you covered. Okay, let's slide that right leg all the way down. Take your block out if you used one and come back to Superman. Arms extend past crown of the head. Forehead grounded. Wiggle those hips side to side. So it's time for Superman. Or, sorry, not Superman. We're in Superman. It's time for Sphinx Part 2. So some of you might need to go through that whole progression again. Others might just need to come back to where they left off in Sphinx Part 1. So just remember, if you go into the fuller expression, there's a few more things you have to worry about. Long spine, shoulders away from ears, shoulder blades on the back. And maybe you're taking the feet up to the sky. Now, there is a couple of other ways to bring in more extension into the spine should you need it. And I'm just going to demo with blocks this time instead of a bolster, but you could use your bolster. But some people might not have one and might have blocks. So elevating the forearms brings more compression into the spine. As you go deeper into the back bend, you just got to watch those glutes. When we're doing a back bend in a typical yoga class, we want the glutes. We want them active. We want that whole posterior kinetic chain active. But when we're in yin, we do not. We want to get into fascia, not muscle. So relax the glutes. Get heavy into that space right beneath your belly button. You can really check in with your breath here because you should feel your belly push into your mat on your inhale and then hollow away from the mat on your exhale. Now I'm going to show for this last minute one other variation. It's called seal. Hands more towards the corners of your mat, straight arms. Again, lifting yourself higher up away from the earth through the upper body. Not letting glutes fire. And if this is fairly easy, you can even walk the hands back closer and lift yourself higher. So just remembering, we shouldn't get any pinching or stabbing sensations. Stay with your breath. Okay. Wherever you happen to be, we're all going to return back to Superman. Hands past the crown of the head, forehead grounded. Take a cleansing breath here. Inhale, nose. Exhale, out. And let's bend back through the arms, back to cactus arms. Turning right ear down to your mat or right side of the head to a block. This time, left knee slides up the floor towards left elbow. So releasing the other half of the spine and releasing left psoas. Come back to your breath. All right, let's slide that left leg back down alongside the right. Forehead back to center. Arms past the crown of the head, back to our Superman. And then bringing hands right in underneath shoulder caps, elbows drawn in by ribs. Activate pushing muscles and lift yourself up and away. All right. Next posture we're going to visit is called saddle. It can be really a hard posture for most people. So I'm going to start showing you the most accessible variation and then progressing. If you have a bolster or a cushion, you're going to need it behind you. You might also need a block or two. So saddle is all about getting into our quads and into our hip flexors, especially the psoas. There are different ways you can do this. So some people are able to sit right down in between their heels. This can be really hard on a lot of people's knees. It's a lot of torquing of the knee, and we're internally rotating the hip. So I suggest coming onto a block because that builds some space behind the kneecap, or even two blocks. So you just get yourself settled, feeling like you're stable, and your knees are happy, okay? So 2 blocks if you really need some space behind the kneecaps. 1 block if you just need a little bit of space. And maybe you don't need a block at all. But if you get any sort of twinging or angry sensation on your knees, you be better to block yourself up. So then what we want to do, internally we've rotated our hips, starting to target our quads. But then we want to come back into extension. So take your hands back behind you onto your bolster or your cushion and start to lean back. Now we never want those knees to pop up away from the mat. If your knees pop up, you've gone too far. You need to bring yourself back. You might be able to come down onto your forearms. This might be your saddle. Now some people have a lot of flexibility and are able to lie back with a bolster and a block for under their head, and they're able to come all the way back like this. And this would be their saddle. I want you obviously to find the one that works in your body. All that matters is we start to get some extension. You don't have to take this full expression of the pose to get benefits. So please find what works for you. And if that means you're just reclining a little bit, that's fine. So saddle is not a posture that we tend to hang out in for a long period of time. And that's because it is quite challenging for most people. So please remember, if you need to come out early, just come up nice and slow. And what you really have to be mindful is if you've come back quite a ways and you're really reclined, you have to really be careful coming out. So 30 more seconds here. So if you're quite far back, please come out nice and slow. Take it in steps. And then all of us just walking ourselves back to upright. Nice and slow. We're going to release these quads. So you're just going to bring yourself up and forward back to more of a tabletop position. And just take any props that you've used off to the side. So that's saddle. It's not a posture that I teach a lot. And just because it is pretty challenging, but it is a really amazing posture for psoas. Also rectus femoris, and also through the lower back, which obviously when we have some psoas issues, this tends to have some problems. But I just wanted you to be careful. So you can modify that one as you need. All right, let's now do the very last things for our psoas. And we're going to do what's called dragon series, and they can be challenging. So working the psoas is either a class that you really like or in some cases you really hate. So I'm going to show you the modification first. Some people have to be much more careful with their knees, and having their upper body weight over their knees in a lunge is just not available. Never fear. There is a modification. It's not easy, it's still challenging, but it's much kinder to your knees. So your modification would be what we call an upside down dragon. And you'd bring your right knee in as though it could just go right down into your armpit. Deep bend through the right leg. Sole of the right foot like you're standing on the ceiling. Using either a strap or your hand on the outside of the right leg or foot, then you would extend that left leg. Now again, you might need to keep a little bend in it. Your lower back has to be okay with this. So this upside down dragon is also pretty much half of a happy baby. So if that's easier for you to understand. That would be your modification. And of course, you would do the same thing on the other side. So there's your modification. And I want you to either start with that or at any time when we're doing the dragon series, if you're like, I cannot do this way, please go to on your back and take upside down dragon. All right. If you're coming with me, we're going to take our blocks up towards the edges of our mat. And we're going to use either our thick cushions or blankets as padding for the back knee, because knees are bony and it's going to get uncomfortable otherwise. So we're going to come into a lunge. So left knee is padded up and our right foot comes inside of the right block. And we're going to set up this front knee so that the right knee is either stacked right over top of that ankle or it's behind. Now, doing more 90-90 legs is perfectly acceptable for a dragon. You might need to take that variation if you've had a hip replacement. Okay, so please do what's right for your body. Otherwise, if you're coming more forward and not doing 90-90 legs, you really want to make sure that you do not overstep that knee over top of the ankle. That's called overstepping dragon, and we're not doing it. Now, target here is actually left psoas again, left hip flexor group. So the further that left knee is behind the left hip, the more it's going to be targeted. Hands into your blocks, chest and thigh together. Spine is long. So this is baby dragon, and here we go. So again, at any time if you need to come out nice and slow. If at any time you think, I just want to go on my back and do the upside down dragon, do what's right for you. The dragons are challenging, they're hard. A lot of people hate them. But they're also one of the best things you can do for your psoas. So it's just like the saddle posture we did previous. The hard ones have a lot of benefits, but we just have to really be careful, especially of our knees and our backs. So stay with your breath. So we're essentially lunging here. Lunging is something you should do every day, especially if you're a runner or walker or a cross-country skier or any of those things that use explosive, repetitive rhythmic movements of these upper quadrants, especially quads and hip flexors. So stay with your breath. You're going to need it in your dragons. So it's pretty typical to stay in 2 minutes per. I don't think I'm going to go the full 2 minutes. But when you're doing this at home, if you want to, once you're familiar more with the sequence, Hang out 2 minutes. All right. We're going to transition from baby dragon. Right hand up onto right knee. Left hand on top of the right. We're going to push into those palms and grow tall. Now, I always like to sit up out of my hips an inch or two and then sink back in. So knee has not gone past the ankle again. So you could be more 90-90 legs, or you're here. This is called high flying dragon. So what happened? Still targeting the same old hip flexors and psoas, but we have shifted our weight. So upper body now is weights distributed right over top of the hip setup. For some people, this is more challenging. So if you need to just go back to baby, you can. You can go back to baby dragon, or you can go onto your back. This will also challenge your balance. So you might feel a lot of wobbling happening. That's good. Wobbling is as not falling, just wobbling, and we're correcting our balance as we do it. So some added benefits there. Couple more breaths here. Sometimes your balance is really challenged. So lots of salt can affect your balance, not sleeping well, doing balancing postures at night as opposed to morning. Lots of things affect your balance. Changes every day. It's a moving target. All right, let's come back to baby dragon for a moment. Now, we're going to pick up the right block and heel toe the right foot over to the edge of our mat and bring the block on the inside. So this is going to transition us into low flying dragon. So again, you could be more 90-90 legs or sink your hips forward. Hands can just come into the block, or you can turn the blocks up one height setting and bring your forearms down. Now, just be careful because when you alter the height of the blocks, they get less stable. You're going to notice that your right knee is wanting to open out. That's fine, but keep the right sole grounded. Low flying dragon. Stay with your breath. These dragons really require us to anchor our minds. Couple more breaths here in low flying dragon. Remember, at any time you can go back to baby or you can flip onto your back. We're going to prep ourselves for winged dragon. Blocks stay where they are. We're going to roll up onto that right outer edge of the foot, so lifting sole away and then bringing it back down. Roll out onto the edge of the right foot, sole back down. One more time, roll it out. If it's okay for you to stay here, you'll stay here in winged dragon. If not, go to low flying dragon or go back to baby. Your knee is going to really open out to the side here, hence why it's called winged dragon. Back to your breath. So if you've never done these before, a minute each one is plenty. You could even do 30 seconds. They're hard. Last few breaths here. Now I know we just want to pop right out of this, but remember, in the end, we have to be slow. So sole foot back down. And then heel toe that right foot out far enough until you can take the right foot back. Now, it's nice to take a break between sides, right? So you could do some movement between sides. So some people like to do just half of a bird dog on each side. Other people find a down dog is quite nice here. Or rippling forward into a high plank and alternating to down dog. Do whatever feels good in your body. There are no rules. Maybe you think, I don't want to do anything. Well, that's fine too. All right. Set your blocks back up. Have your knee pad ready. We're going to go into the other side. So I think I will just turn so you get a better angle. You don't have to go anywhere. So it's the left foot that's coming forward now, inside of the left block. So remember, we need to set up that front knee. You're either going to be more 90-90 legs with knee behind the ankle, or you're going to stack the knee over the ankle. You have the option of how deep this lunge is. So the further the right knee goes behind the right hip, the deeper the lunge is. Hands into the blocks. Chest and thigh together if you're in not 90-90 position. If you're in 90-90, you'll keep your chest towards the thigh, but it might not reach. And long spine, ears away from shoulders. No clenching the jaw. You could even smile. In our baby dragon. So now, having done the other ones, you know why this is called baby, because it's the nicest one. So if you should be choosing to do the upside down dragon on your back, it's still going to be fairly challenging. You probably aren't going to want to hang out there for the full 4 minutes or however long we're doing this more upright version. So take breaks and go back in when you need to. All right, let's bring left hand on top of the left knee, right hand on top of the left hand. Push in, grow tall. You can sit up out of your hips an inch or two, and then sink yourself back in. So this is high flying dragon. And we've got that weight over top of our hip set up again. Challenging our balance again. You also might find yourself getting kind of hot. Don't forget, the upper quadrants of your legs are where your biggest muscle groups are. So Your psoas is not the longest muscle in the body. It's the second longest, I think. It's the second longest. But they take a lot of blood, these big muscles that we're working. Couple more breaths. All right, let's come back to baby. You might choose to stay here or go on your back, or you're going to pick up your left block. Heel toe your foot out, your left foot out towards left edge of your mat, and bring the block on the inside left foot. So again, you have 90-90 legs as an option, or sinking the hips forward and down, just making sure the knee does not go past the ankle. Hands can stay into the blocks on their lower setting, or you can turn the blocks up a setting and bring your forearms down. I don't recommend doing the tallest setting of the blocks. I've seen some spectacular falls that way in yoga studios. So remember, the left knee will want to open out. That's okay. Try to keep the full sole grounded though. Okay, let's prime for wing dragon. We're gonna roll out onto the left edge of the foot. Bring the sole back down. Roll out again. Sole back down. One more time. Roll out on the edge of the foot. If you're okay to stay here, do so. If not, come back to your low flying dragon or come back to baby, whatever works for you. We're in the home stretch. It's almost over. Stay with that breath. And of course, as always, observing which side is easier, which side is more accessible, right? We do these things not to just help our bodies, but to also learn about them. And the last few breaths. Okay, slowly bring the sole down. Slowly bring yourself up and out. Heel toe that foot over to the left till you can comfortably take the left leg back. If you wish to take some movement here, great ahead. If you just want to head onto your back for Shavasana, well, that's understandable too. All right, we did it. Your psoas should be fairly happy by now with the amount of extension that it has had in this practice. So you can make your way into Shavasana, whatever that happens to look like for you. So, as I mentioned before, the number one thing you can do for your psoas is get it as much extension as possible. And of course, that counts for all the hip flexors, but we're really just trying to target the psoas today. So we did a couple of things that are a little bit more psoas related, but obviously all of your hip flexors are going to benefit. So coming on to your back, if that's your preferred shape for Shavasana, either legs extended or knees bent, feet planted. If the legs are long, just take them a little bit wide. Let feet flop open to the side. So I'll release those shoulder blades to the earth. Backs of hands grounded. Palms turned up, fingers gently curled. Let's just take us a little rocking of the head side to side. Like you're saying a really slow no to someone. And just let your head just rock back onto that naturally flat part of the skull. Eyes closed or gaze softened. Mouth is closed. Bring your awareness back to your breath. So if you're interested, there are quite a few books written on just the psoas. And that's because it's a pretty interesting muscle, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, energetically. I'm not sure if I have the title exactly right, but I think one of the books was called psoas, the psoas Freedom Party. That's a catchy title. All right, let's take 3 cleansing breaths here. So inhale, nose. Exhale out with a sigh. Inhale, nose. Exhale, release. Last inhale from bottom of the feet all the way up to the crown of the head. And when you exhale, completely empty those lungs. Let the breath go. And close the mouth. Unclench your back teeth. Let your tongue release into the lower palate of your mouth. Tip of the tongue behind the front teeth. Cheek muscles relax. Muscles in the temples relax. Smooth out all those worry lines on the forehead. Let eyes get heavy in the sockets. And slight tuck of the chin as we lengthen in the back of the neck. Tops of the shoulders away from the ears. Shoulder blades melting into your mat. Sacrum melting into your mat. Whole spine releases. Pelvis is heavy and grounded. Arms are heavy, like they just filled up with sand. Legs heavy, full of sand. So feel your entire back body just being held by the earth. There's nothing you need to do here. You can completely release and let go. Whole back body grounded and heavy. And then through the front body, through the belly, the heart center, the throat center, just feel a softness and a lightness. And then see if you can sense feeling both grounded and heavy, but light at the same time. And let your awareness shift into that space between your eyebrows. It's quiet here. There's stillness. You should feel like coming home. And just take Shavasana for as long as you need.